Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests. Firstly, from the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign, Ruth Watson. Ruth, how are you doing this evening?
I'm very good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
And on the other side of me, in very stylish black and white, we have the MSP, for Greenock and Inverclyde, Stuart McMillan. Stuart, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Kenny. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. So we start today, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. And as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 577,974 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 557,342 were confirmed negative, 20,632 were positive. There were 154 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 today. But once again, there are 0 new reported deaths of people. This will be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all of those will necessarily be tested. Although again, as we always do, we urge you, if you are showing symptoms at all, please do book a test as soon as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, 264 people were in hospital last night, 6 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection remains at 2,494. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures available show that 41,504 people who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 3 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And we can also advise you that just before we came on air, it was announced that as of midnight tonight, restrictions on visiting other households are being reintroduced in Glasgow, West Dunbartonshire and East Renfrewshire after an increase in cases of coronavirus in the area. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced the move after 66 new positive tests were recorded in the Greater Glasgow and Clyde area. The restrictions will be in place for 2 weeks, but will be reviewed after 1 week. And just before we go any further, I would remind you, if you want to get involved in the conversation here, you can do so by following us on Twitter at BroadcastScot and then tweeting using the hashtag Scotland@7. That's hashtag Scotland, AT and the number 7. We will, as you can see, be flashing some of those tweets up on the screen during the show, and we'd love to hear what you've got to say. But we start with the programme for government, and ensuring Scotland's economic, health and social recovery from the coronavirus pandemic is the focus of this year's programme for government, Nicola Sturgeon said today. Speaking in Parliament, the First Minister said the Scottish Government would prioritise work to suppress the virus, building on its commitment to COVID-19 testing, contact tracing and surveillance. The COVID-19 response will be bolstered with the launch of Protect Scotland, a new proximity tracing app later this month. The app will add an additional means of notifying people that they may have been exposed to the virus and that they should isolate to prevent onward transmission. The First Minister also set out the government's plans for renewal while ensuring a green recovery is at the heart of the economic recovery, with job creation, support for health and well-being and work to tackle inequalities all high on the agenda. A national transition training fund will support up to 10,000 people at risk of redundancy or unemployment. The Scottish Youth Guarantee will ensure every young person has the opportunity of work, education or training. A new £100 million Green Jobs Fund will be created, while a new inward investment plan will create 100,000 high-value jobs over the next decade and boost GDP. The pandemic has also reiterated the need for a radical rethink of social care. An independent review of the care system will be established to examine how adult social care can be most effectively reformed to deliver a national approach to care and support services. This will include consideration of a national care service. And Stuart, I think I'll come to you first on this. I don't know how much advance notice you had of this programme for government, but what was it that was in there that really jumped out at you as an important thing for the Scottish Government to be working on this year?
Okay, thanks, Kenny. Just 2 questions there. The first one, we don't have advance notice of the programme for government. Okay. the First Minister stands up, we find out what the outcome is. Can you give me 2 seconds?
Right, I'll just pop over to Ruth just now while Stuart's just making a wee adjustment there. Ruth, what jumped out at you from the programme for government?
There were a lot of things. I was very encouraged by the commitment to renewables. I was very, very encouraged by the commitment to make sure that there's not a lost generation. So the commitment to ensuring that all youngsters leaving school have got a route into work or further education was very welcome. I was very, very pleased to see that the building programme to try to kickstart the economy again was going to continue to ensure that there's affordable housing. And I'm hopeful that within that, I gleaned that there was an ongoing commitment to try to keep roofs over people's heads, because there was a comment made about continuing and at the moment during COVID, nobody's homeless apparently because they're being put into accommodation. So I took from one of the comments made in the First Minister's speech that was a situation that that the government would like to see continue. So the commitment to affordable housing, the the development of Child First, the new benefit that's going to be paid as of next year. That's very encouraging, and a commitment to enshrine in Scots law the United Nations rights of the child. So for me, I'm very passionate about social justice. I'm very passionate that I feel very strongly that people should, in a world where there's billionaires and millionaires, it's a crime, I think, for people to be hungry and to be homeless. So I think that give opportunity from the beginning to have an equality of opportunity to make of themselves what they can. I think that's to be welcomed.
And Stuart, I think we've got you now. What jumped out at you from the programme for government? What's got you excited?
Actually, bearing in mind the constituency that I represent, there has been many challenges in my community for decades. One of the things that the First Minister said today was that the target to have 20% of entrance into university from the 20% most deprived areas by 2030. Now, for me, as someone who grew up in Port Glasgow, and I was fortunate to go to university, studied European Business Management with Languages, and also obtained an MBA European. It wasn't something that everyone wanted to do. So I think to go forward, to have more of an opportunity for people in communities like mine to get to university, to have that chance, I think is hugely ambitious. But I accept, that's with a longer term goal. But certainly a few things that the First Minister spoke about today. I absolutely welcome the National Transition Training Fund. As you touched upon earlier, Kenny, that's to provide support for up to 10,000 people facing redundancy and unemployment. The Scottish Youth Guarantee, as we know, certainly from the 2008 financial crash, how important it was for the Scottish Government to introduce measures to try to deal with youth unemployment, and that proved to be successful. So something similar to that will be hugely important, certainly in the years to come, as a consequence of the potential no-deal Brexit, but also the effects of COVID. Another element was the independent review of the adult social care and the wider discussion that needs to happen there. As you're aware, I'm a member of the Social Justice Commission, and this is one aspect that we have been discussing as well in that commission. I think the Scottish Child Payment to come in by November of this year with a to come in by February 2021. I think that is hugely important. And one other element, there are many, but certainly one other element, just for this particular part, is to once again get back on target to build the 50,000 affordable homes, with an additional £300 million to be put into that. So for me, this was a hugely ambitious final programme for government of this parliamentary session, notwithstanding the fact that obviously what we face coming up at the end of the year, but obviously what we're still living through regarding COVID-19. And I am very pleased, I generally am very pleased with what I heard the First Minister say today.
Mm-hmm. And on this subject of the care review, it talks about consideration being given to a national care service. This is something that a lot of experts have talked about recently, and there has been this ongoing process in Scotland for some time of trying to integrate health and social care a lot better. How do you think that review will proceed, and how soon do you expect it to report, and how do you think that process will go?
Well, certainly when the First Minister spoke about it today, there is a clear appreciation, certainly not just within the SNP, but across the chamber, that this is something that's long overdue, and I think, and more people in society will actually appreciate as well that it's probably been a sector that, although there's been a lot of attention paid to it, but at the same time, it's probably not been given the prominence that it could have received in the past. So I think that its time has come, and to have a genuine, open review of what could happen or what can happen, with as wide a dialogue as possible, is very important, because certainly in my community, I've got a growing older population, and that is going to continue for some time to come. Mm-hmm. If you look at the National Register of Scotland population estimates, my community is very much at the fore for a policy like that, but it's also not solely Inverclyde, but other parts of the country too. So I think this particular policy would be and is hugely important, and can shape that social care for many generations to come.
And Ruth, coming back to you now, the programme for government mentions well-being quite a few times. How much do you think this programme does set out a path to some sort of well-being economy for Scotland, rather than putting economic growth at all costs at the top of the agenda?
I think it sounds like a fairly sensible approach. If you tackle the small stuff, the big stuff falls into place. And if people feel, I really liked the idea of this 20-mile, I can't remember the phrase, but it was like a sort of 20-mile radius that if you look after people's communities, if everybody can walk to work, walk to the shops, walk to get a cup of coffee, then they start building community. And through that, you start getting, well, you're getting exercise, you're supporting the local economy, you're supporting small business, you're supporting a holistic approach to the community, you're cutting your carbon footprint because you're walking, not driving. And it's just, as we have seen at the moment with COVID, community really matters. And a lot of communities, like mine here in Kerrymuir, have done really, really well. You know, we've sort of been connecting with people, we've been cooperating with each other, and a lot of folk are really enjoying working from home and not having to spend a significant amount of their day stuck in a metal box, driving to and fro, churning, carbon emissions into the air. So it makes sense to me on a load of levels. This whole go back to work to save pret-a-manger. I would much rather be supporting my local coffee shop down the road, or at least by going to buy coffee beans from her so I can make it myself at home, because I'm still not going out to coffee shops. But I think that I was particularly excited by the prospect of the Scottish National Investment Bank coming online soon, and the potential for that to be a source of revenue for helping to kickstart people into opening shops or facilities again, or finding new ways of doing business. And so to get a plug in for Love Lamb Week. Local butchers apparently are saying that they have done a year's worth of business in the space of a matter of weeks over COVID during lockdown. So the whole prospect of coming up with a short chain food supply, supporting local farmers, supporting local businesses, supporting local suppliers, keeping our carbon footprint low, and eating fresh local food. All of these things are really good, and I think that the programme for change, the programme that was unveiled today, has real potential if it is delivered.
Mm-hmm. And Stuart, a similar question to you. How much can this programme for government really transform Scotland into that well-being economy that we've been talking about? The pandemic obviously kind of opens up some opportunities for bigger change than might have been possible otherwise. Do you think we're on the right track with that now?
I believe we are, and I was elected in 2007, and I have seen a vast majority of change in that period of time. I think more people are paying more attention to their local communities, want to shop as local as they possibly can, and not just because of COVID, but I think there has been a bit of a move to that, as well as this is where it might sound contradictory, but the issue of online shopping, and that clearly has been a bit of a boost in recent times. But I think more people are appreciative of the quality of homegrown produce. And if you look at the Scottish Government strategy that started some 7 or 8 years or so ago now regarding food and drink, the aspect of food and drink to Scotland's economy has more than doubled in that period of time. So I think pre-2007, I think many people may have just thought of Scotland's larder as being probably sugar related and maybe not so healthy. But actually, our larder is extremely healthy. It's varied, and more people are understand exactly what we have. In terms of the transformation element, I think more people also, notwithstanding the challenges that we do face, and we will always face challenges as a nation. But I think more people can go to probably the vast majority of the communities across the country, and they'll be able to see areas and aspects of regeneration, of investment that's been put in place to actually try to assist and to help. But when it comes to regeneration and investment, as long as it's done with people and communities at the core, as compared to being done to them, then we'll actually have a better outcome as well.
Well, there was something else announced by the First Minister today. Nicola Sturgeon has unveiled plans to publish legislation in the coming months to hold a second independence referendum. The First Minister said the draft bill would present the timing of the new vote, the question that would be put, and that the case for independence would be presented to voters at the Holyrood election next May. Before the end of this Parliament, we will publish a draft bill setting out the proposed terms and timing of an independence referendum, as well as the proposed question that people will be asked in that referendum. And then, at next year's election, we will make the case for Scotland to become an independent country and seek a clear endorsement of Scotland's right to choose our own future, she told MSPs. So, Stuart, were you expecting this to come up today?
Semi, to be honest. But I'm delighted that the First Minister has put this in the programme for government. I've been a member of the SNP for some 28 years, and knowing what it was like to campaign in my early years in the party, how unpopular the party was, but also the concept and the notion of independence, to the situation that we have now, where The pro-independence side is ahead consistently in the opinion polls. And for me, it's about staying focused, it's about staying calm, it's about continuing to get the message out of what an independent Scotland actually can look like, but also how we can progress the lives and all of the communities within our country with the full powers of independence. And so I was genuinely delighted with what the First Minister said today. And certainly in the last term, I was on the referendum bill committee and then the devolution for the powers committee after that. So I know that type of work that will have to happen when the bill comes into the Parliament, and I look forward to the bill progressing through the parliamentary process, going forward to the question and the referendum, and Scotland becoming that independent nation that we all want to see.
And Ruth, we've heard several times since the Brexit vote in 2016 that a referendum was just around the corner. Do you feel like this is finally the time when it's going to happen, and this is now Scotland kind of on the path to independence within a short period of time?
Well, first I need to make clear that Keep Scotland the Brand, which is the campaign I founded, it is completely party neutral and is apolitical. So the comments I make are in a personal capacity and do not in any way represent those of the campaign. Bring it on. Bring it on. We need to have this. I joined the SNP the first time I ever joined a political party in 2016, 3 days after the Brexit vote. Every promise that was made by the Unionists, by the British nationalists, has been tramped upon and destroyed. The rights of thousands of people who have been born elsewhere but made Scotland their home are being threatened. My right as a European is being abandoned. My right to eat healthy food and live within a human rights framework is being dismantled and taken away from me. And quite frankly, I think I should sue Michael Gove and Boris Johnson for post-traumatic stress, because this reminds me very much of my abusive first marriage, where my first husband was very much, you're nothing without me, you can't leave. And this reminds me very much of what life is like in an abusive relationship. And I think that Scotland needs to take stock. I think we need to look around us. I think we need to understand, as more and more people are, that a healthy relationship shouldn't hurt this way. And I think that every institution which I grew up thinking we shared British values. I up until about a week before the vote in 2014, I was actually quite ambivalent about it. I was living in Australia. I couldn't vote at the time, but I didn't go from no to yes until about a week before, and that was more on a gut after a friend and actually one of my former mentors, a journalist, sent me a load of was it Jeremy Vine? I think it was, finally pushed me over the edge. And it was just that thing about, I always thought of shared values. I thought that the values that I held were British values. I valued the NHS, I valued British Rail, I valued a range of national institutions. I like unions, that's why I like the European Union. I like unions where there's consent and where there's agreement and where you're treated with dignity. And I looked around me, and it was like a veil fell from my eyes, and I saw that every institution that I valued had been hollowed out, had been asset stripped, and had been sold off. And I realised then that all those institutions that I valued were not British values, that they'd been just privatised and abandoned in a wholly Americanised fashion. And if I want to hold on to those institutions which I value, Scotland has to be independent, because otherwise they will bear the hallmarks of grubby little fingers from Michael Gove and Cummings, and they will be sold off, and we will become some kind of ghastly reintroduction to a post-feudal system, and we will regret it greatly.
Well, we have obviously been discussing the independence movement quite a bit on Scotland at 7 recently. If you want to check out the show we did on Friday with Keith Brown, MSP, and Maggie Chapman, who's the co-convener of the Scottish Independence Campaign, it's a really excellent look at where the movement stands just now. And the week before, on the 21st of August, we spoke to Mike Russell, which gave us a lot of background on that as well. He, of course, has been dealing with Brexit. And our next story, Downing Street has played down the prospect of reaching a trade deal with the EU in time for December, saying it will be very difficult, and blaming Brussels' insistence on tackling the tough issues up front. The UK's chief negotiator David Frost is meeting his EU counterpart Michel Barnier in London in advance of the next round of formal talks next week. But with the clock ticking to the 31st of December when the status quo transition is due to end, Boris Johnson's official spokesman conceded that hopes of a deal were dwindling. The EU continues to insist that we must agree on difficult areas in the negotiations, such as EU state aid, before any further work can be done in any other areas of the negotiations, including on legal texts, and that makes it very difficult to make progress, the spokesman said. We would instead like to settle the simplest issues first in order to build momentum in the talks, as time is short for both sides. The EU has consistently said it wants to see the contentious issues of fisheries policy and state aid settled up front. And Stuart, if I could come to you first on this, is the British government, does it have a point here that it would be easier maybe to settle some of the things that are fairly easy to agree on first and then hash out the details of the more difficult subjects, rather than this EU approach of dealing with the most difficult issues first?
Well, that would make some sense, but bearing in mind this is the UK government. But you also have to remember that at the very beginning of this, the phrase that was used was, nothing is agreed until it's all agreed. So, for me, I find that the UK government's position is just untenable. They're the ones who have got us into this mess, because that's what it is. It's a mess. The European Union, representing 27 member states, they're the ones with the cards. They're the ones with the strength, whereas the UK isn't. And for the UK as well, we're also promised that all these deals that the UK have got lined up and going to sign, and quite frankly, that's not been delivered. But why would we be surprised with that? I think the European Union, they have to protect and defend their 27 members. I understand that, and I think most people understand that as well. Whereas the UK government, trying agitators, and I think it suits their narrative to not have a deal and blame the nasty bureaucrats and eurocrats for not getting a deal, and they will have a compliant media. Obviously, clearly not broadcast in Scotland, but they will have a compliant media who will actually assist to try to get that media over to the population. But it's quite clear that in Scotland, in Wales, in parts of England, but not all, but parts, as well as Northern Ireland, I think more people are waking up to the fact that they've been sold a pup. And a no-deal Brexit does not benefit anybody, but certainly it benefits the UK a lot less as compared to the EU 27.
And Ruth, we've been talking about these noises coming out of both sides in the last month or two that have been increasingly, pessimistic. What do you make of this from Number 10 today?
I think it's just another in a long list of lies. It's I've given up trying to be diplomatic when interpreting what's coming out of Number 10. I think Michel Barnier hit the nail on the head when he said that the UK government wasn't acting in good faith. There have been agreements agreed, signed to, and then rolled back on by the UK. It's not. how can you negotiate in good faith with somebody who promises one thing and then walks away from it and says, oh, this isn't fair the next, when they agreed to it and signed up to it? You've got Ian Duncan Smith complaining that that the bill which he forced through so fast, MPs couldn't have a look at it. And now he's saying, oh well, it's not fair. This isn't fair because we didn't have a chance to scrutinise it. Well, that's only because he pushed it through. This agenda entirely fits with the Rees-Mogg disaster capitalist school of neoliberalism. I think that we are on course to see a magnificent selling out to another asset stripping on a massive scale of Brexit land, and those people who are profiting will skip off to their second or third homes elsewhere and leave us grubbing about in the mud, quite frankly. I think that Michel Barnier has been extremely straightforward every step of the way. I've always known what it was he was on about, and I'm not a trade negotiator, but I do know that the precedent has been set is that most trade deals take between 7 to 11 years to negotiate. So why did they think it was going to be any different? 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I was at a Brexit brunch, and some of the World Trade, some of the World Trade negotiators who were working on behalf of the British government were there, and they held up as they had a spreadsheet, they were going through some of the issues facing them, and one of their slides was called unicorns, and the next slide was called more unicorns, and that was the British government's, basically their sort of standpoint, and they were saying that they found it very confusing because they'd never been in a position where they were expected to negotiate on the behalf of a nation that they knew the negotiations they were taking part in were going to make that nation poorer and worse off. And they said it's very odd for them. So even back then, very clearly the government was being told, the ministers knew perfectly well what was before us. If I know, and I'm just a wee housewife from Kerrymuir, how come the government ministers didn't know? Although I have to confess I have an advantage over Dominic Raab, and I do know that there is water in the channel and that trade comes across via cargo.
Well, on that note, we move across the Atlantic, and before his visit to Kenosha, Wisconsin today, Donald Trump defended a teenager who shot 2 anti-racism protesters dead in the city last week. The president also compared the actions of a white Kenosha police officer who fired 7 shots at a black man, hitting him 4 times in the back, to a golfer choking on a putt. The Democratic governor of Wisconsin and the mayor of Kenosha both urged Trump to stay away from the city, where many have marched to protest the shooting last month of Jacob Blake by Officer Rustin Shesky. Blake remains in hospital and is experiencing partial paralysis due to spinal injuries. In an interview with Fox News host Laura Ingraham last night, Trump compared Chesky to a golfer missing a putt. Shooting the guy in the back many times. I mean, couldn't you have done something different? Couldn't you have wrestled him? Trump said. In the meantime, he might have been going for a weapon and, there's a whole big thing there. But they choke, just like in a golf tournament. They miss a 3-foot putt. Stuart, what do you think Donald Trump was even trying to say there?
I've got no idea. Every single day for the time that Donald Trump has been the President of the United States, every single day he comes out with something ridiculous and shows his complete arrogance and lack of empathy. And some of his comments have just been abhorrent over the last near 4 years. If you look at what Joe Biden said with his comments, actually being critical of all sides who have taken part in violence, taken part in looting, taken part in attacks against the public. That's the type of comment that you would actually want to hear from a president. And I thought Joe Biden's comments will certainly strike a chord with more people. Some of the people who will be swithering as to what to do. And bearing in mind, there are Republicans who will not be voting Republican that in this election they are going to be voting for Joe Biden, not because that they've suddenly switched to become Democrats, but they realise the option they've got in front of them is not a positive one for the United States and for the world. So I would hope that Joe Biden continues with the strong and that he's taking to the population of the United States, and that the population of the US pick a different president in November.
And Ruth, as part of this same interview with Laura Ingraham, he kind of tried to defend Kyle Rittenhouse, this young man who's been charged with killing some of the protesters. But he also launched into this very weird conspiracy theory about people in black uniforms getting on planes with of all sorts of gear.
I can't tell you about it. I'll tell you maybe later, because it's all super secret. I mean, the man's a nut job.
Yeah, what do we make of this? A president kind of launching into full-on conspiracy theory nonsense that we know is not true. It's already been debunked. What does it say about the world when we've got the leader of the free world fully engaged in conspiracy theories like this?
Well, I think the problem is that we're looking at a world which is becoming less free, and looking at the way in which Trump has tried to destabilize democracy. He's trying to undermine confidence in democracy, and it's working to a scary degree. I mean, Stuart may well be right, and I hope he is, that Trump does not win a second bout in office, but the Christian so-called, I mean, goodness knows what kind of Christianity we're talking about, but the Christian far right, who have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend this young man who went out with an assault rifle to be part of the militia. And you're seeing footage of the police saying, "Oh, thank goodness you guys are here." You know, it's the good old boys. You know, we're seeing a hearkening back to a really dark part of American history with racism and segregation, the groups of population who feel that somehow equality means that they're going down in the world rather than other people are coming up. You know, that if they're not feeling superior to somebody else, then somehow they're losing out, and that is deeply concerning. And it's deeply concerning because it's not just happening in America. It's not just that there's huge swathes of the American population who still are saying that they're going to vote for Trump because they don't care that he's a liar, they don't care that he's a misogynist. They like what he stands for, and that harks back to the whole Brexit scenario. It harks back to looking at Erdogan in Turkey. There's a real rise of the strong man in many nations, and it's very worrying. And I'm looking at footage in England of there's a place in Manchester that is selling fascist flags, the British League of Fascists. Their flags and their cups are for sale again, and there was people marching through. I mean, just, you know, all this talk about Spitfires and winning the war and rule flipping Britannia, and you've got fascists openly marching on the streets of England again. And I think that it's all connected. I think there's a great deal of that connects the Bannon Breitbart sleaze, and you've got Cummings, who's an acolyte. You know, he's spent time over in Russia, he spent time with Bannon, and now they're over here. They're talking about coming for the Electoral Commission. So I don't think we should kid ourselves on that the land of the free and America's free, and I certainly don't think we can kid ourselves on that great British democracy is always going to be free and fair, because I think that we're looking at the tendrils. What happened in 1930s Germany is happening again here, and if we don't wake up and take action and look it in the eye and expose it for what it is, then I think that we are going to go down a very, very dark passage of history again.
Mm. Well, we do move back to Scotland now, and revised guidance for colleges, universities and student accommodation providers reflecting the latest public health advice has been published. It builds on previous guidance and uses the most up-to-date evidence to support universities, colleges and accommodation providers to plan for a safe return to campus in the new academic year. It includes a continuation of blended learning with significantly reduced frequency and numbers of staff and students on campus compared to pre-COVID levels. A requirement to keep face-to-face teaching to small groups of generally less than 30 and supported by other infection prevention measures. Advice that face coverings should be worn in any area of campus where physical distancing can't be guaranteed. And a requirement for colleges and universities to give clear information on regulations and guidance to students arriving from outside Scotland and to take steps to ensure international students and staff who need to quarantine comply with the law. So just quite quickly, Stuart, how do you think the university sector is coping with the pandemic, and do you think this guidance will be enough to facilitate a fairly straightforward return to education, higher education?
I think certainly universities and colleges have worked tremendously hard to get the guidance, put the guidance in place, to assist also both our staff and also students. It's clear also that that the student experience will be different, particularly about those who are going to university for the first time, leaving home, going to uni, particularly the first 2 weeks, the freshers' fortnight and everything else, and that will be different. So there will be a bit of it'll be a different experience, but ultimately universities and colleges have got that responsibility to anyone who actually studies or works on their campuses to ensure that their health and their safety is looked after as best they possibly can. And I am quite confident that the measures that will be put in place will be followed, and they will do the job that's required. There will probably be some tweaks and some changes that will be required as we go forward. But as we can see, certainly from schools, also with secondary schools and pupils having to wear masks in between classes, as well as on the school buses. So I think tweaks will certainly happen, but I'm sure that the universities and colleges will be well prepared for students going there.
Yeah. And we do obviously wish all the best to everybody working to make that happen, and to all the students who have got to think about going back to this very different scenario in just a couple of weeks. But we move on now, and the annual update on education outcomes for looked after children covering the 2018-19 has been released by Scotland's chief statistician. Findings for that period show that attainment for school leavers who were looked after within the year has improved over the last 6 years. However, over the last 4 years, improvement in attainment for looked after school leavers has stalled. Looked after school leavers who were in foster care or with friends or relatives had higher attainment than other placement types. In 2018-19, 81% of looked after school leavers were in a positive destination 3 months after leaving, an increase from 71% in 2012-13. This compares with 95% of all school leavers in 2018-19. And 9 months after leaving school, the proportion of school leavers looked after within the year in a positive destination has increased from 63% in 2012-13 to 71% in 2018-19. This compares with 93% of all school leavers being in a positive destination 9 months after leaving school in 2018-19. So, Ruth, these improvements obviously are good news, but there is still quite a gap there for looked after children. Do you think there's more work that the Scottish Government needs to be doing on this?
Yes, and I think that funding, making sure that social work services are funded adequately is key to that. I think I was really pleased to hear the First Minister make further announcements today about giving support to looked after young adults, people coming out of a care scenario. And I think that the First Minister I think she has a genuine commitment to looked after kids. I sit on an adoption and fostering panel, so I see some extremely distressing paperwork coming through, looking at the decisions that people have to make for these youngsters and what their route's going to be in life. And to be honest, to see the achievements that young people are making when they have had the kind of beginning in life that most of us would consider to be something out of a horror story, I think is a tremendous achievement. As long as that continues, I think one of the biggest things, and it is being addressed, is the fact that for a lot of youngsters, not having somebody in their lives that they can count on. I was still looking to my mum and dad for words of wisdom and advice well up into adulthood. So I think it's a really good thing that youngsters have got, that there is a structure in place, which means that when they leave care at the age of 18, they still do have this formalised connection. And I've seen some very successful foster care scenarios where the foster carers do make a lifelong commitment to this young person. And I think that it's been really good to see that formalised, because youngsters do get a great deal from it. But I think that we cannot overestimate the trauma and the damage it has done to youngsters who have gone through some horrific experiences. And if I had any opportunity to kick any council leader's backside into action, it would be to make sure that social work is a fully funded, properly funded department. I have seen terrible cuts in various social work departments, and it's children who suffer. So it's brilliant having all these commitments, but we have to have these commitments, but those commitments have to start with there being enough social workers and enough resources for them to be able to do their job properly and protect children, and hopefully protect them in such a way that they aren't being taken away from their families. Yes, there are loads of families that being removed. Removal is the only option. And time and again, I see tragic cases or pretty bad cases coming before us where the attempts to keep a child within the family have been tried so much that the child has continued to suffer. And I understand why the efforts are made. But for any young person in care coming out with a positive outcome, I think it's often a remarkable thing, and we should do everything we can to support them.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next story, the BBC's new Director General says the corporation needs to keep reforming with urgency and stressed it must be a universal public service as he arrived for his first day in the job. Tim Davie, the former chief executive of the commercial arm BBC Studios and a former Tory candidate, has replaced Lord Tony Hall in the role and has spent his first day meeting staff at BBC Scotland in Glasgow. In a message sent to all staff, he said it was a tremendous honour to take on the role and confirmed he will be laying out priorities for the future on Thursday. He added, "Overall, my guiding principle is that we are a universal public service, a BBC for all that serves and represents every part of this country. Our focus must be to ensure that we deliver outstanding and unique value to all audiences, those who pay for us and are in effect our customers, in return for their licence fee. To do this, we will need to keep reforming the BBC with urgency so that we are trusted, relevant and indispensable in this digital age." Stuart, do you think Tim Davie's visit to Scotland on day one will see reforms to the BBC that suit what Scotland needs from a public service broadcaster?
Good question. It's clear that the BBC have lost the trust and the relevance of many people in Scotland. We saw that also in the run-up to the 2014 referendum, and that hasn't decreased hugely at all since then. I sit in the Parliament's Culture, Tourism Europe and External Relations Committee, and we have the BBC come in to talk to us once or twice a year. And we had Mr. Hall, Lord Hall, in actually. Was it last year? Now, it's clear that when you look at the amount of revenue that Scotland actually puts into the BBC compared to the amount of money that's spent in Scotland for broadcasting, there is a huge discrepancy. And if you look at any sort of comparison of the money that's put in, Scotland does not get a fair deal from the BBC. I warmly welcome the BBC Scotland channel, the new channel, and I've watched a number of programmes on it, and I genuinely have enjoyed most of what I have watched on that particular channel. But for me, that's a starting point, and there needs to be more output. Certainly from Scotland, more output from Scottish producers, and I think that certainly would be advantageous, and it probably would actually help the BBC themselves to regain some of the trust. But I think the trust element is one area where if they want to regain what they've lost, then they have to look at their news output, because that has seriously had an adverse effect upon people's perceptions of the organisation.
Mm-hmm. And Ruth, one of the big stories today, the Telegraph reported senior sources saying that the BBC was going to have some real reforms to how it did comedy, saying that comedy panel shows, for example, ought to have a wider range of guests to include more people who were pro-Brexit, for example. This was painted as a kind of getting rid of the left-wing bias of comedy on the BBC. Do you think that's the right target that the BBC needs to attack when it comes to perhaps unbalanced coverage?
Well, we've all seen what happens when Liz Truss tries to make a joke. So I don't think she's going to be appearing on Have I Got News for You anytime soon. But, Boris Johnson, he's been a regular presenter on Have I Got News for You, as has Ruth Davidson. So I'm not entirely sure that yet again we're looking at something which is legitimate. I think it's dog whistle. I was a BBC journalist for many years. I worked for the BBC, and back in the days when it was good and it was something I was proud of. And I still have former colleagues I'm in touch with who, quite frankly, there are dark days. We're sort of like in book 5 of Harry Potter, really. We're not in a very good situation where the BBC is concerned, and I think that it comes very much down to the fact that when the Tories first started talking about privatising the BBC was very loved. And so in order to destroy what is loved, you have to stop it from being loved, and then people don't value it anymore and they won't protect it. And we're seeing the same happening with the NHS in England, that people, the value of it is eroded, the trust in it is eroded, so people start grumbling and then you can replace it. And this has been what Rupert Murdoch has been after for as long as I've been paying attention, which is about 30 years. And it's finally coming to pass. And I remember when the BBC logo went from being blue and white to red and white. And if you look at BBC, the 9 o'clock news, all the other BBC news channels out with Scotland, they are red and white, the logo. About 3 weeks after Donalda McKinnon taking over, it was in 2017, you will notice that BBC Scotland and Reporting Scotland is now red, white and blue. So I think following this former Tory candidate to the BBC Scotland today, I fully expect us to have to stand for attention while God Save the Queen is broadcast at regular intervals.
Well, we do move now to our final story of the evening, and more contact tracers will be recruited by the National Contact Tracing Centre to contact people travelling to Scotland from countries where a 14-day quarantine is required. An additional £1 million of Scottish Government funding has been confirmed to recruit and train up to 25 new contact tracers, specifically to support quarantine efforts. The National Centre contacts all passengers returning from a country that is not exempt from quarantine via email and has been contacting around 600 passengers each week. Stuart, we know that the contact tracing teams, from all the evidence we have been doing an excellent job of chasing everybody up. But it does seem that the numbers coming requiring quarantine has been higher than they were expecting. Is this the right move, do you think, to boost that team and get more people contacted and supported properly?
Very much so. Also, as the economy opens up and as more people start to venture out and also go abroad for holidays and work, then it's understandable that we are going to need more contact tracers. And I think it's very much it's a positive move. It's the right thing to do, because we also have to realise that COVID is here for some time to come. It's not going to go away tomorrow. It's not going to be next week. It's here for some time to come. So I see this as being it's the right decision, and I very much welcome these individuals coming on board to help and try and address and deal with some of the issues that COVID is throwing up for our society.
Mm-hmm. And Ruth, basically the same question to you. Do you think the system is working well? Do you think this will be money well spent to get 25 more people doing more contact tracing?
I think it's crucial. I think Professor Debbie Sridhar and the Scottish Government have been doing a remarkably good job. I very much trust Professor Sridhar and follow her on Twitter so I can see what she's saying. I, though, am quite shocked at how little we have been doing really about this with people coming in. I lived in Malaysia during the swine flu outbreak, and if you went out to the country, everybody coming into the country had their temperature taken and contact details taken. If you had a temperature, you were taken and you were put into quarantine there and then. They had people checking there were people taking temperatures and cleaning and fogging regularly in railway stations, in bus stations. There were anywhere that there was a sort of gathering of people, there would be people making checks and informing. And I don't know why we've not been doing it. It sort of strikes me that there's been this sort of first world arrogance that somehow we don't need to do the things that the developing countries have to do. But guess what? A country which actually celebrated Merdeka. So to everyone in Malaysia, Merdeka, because Merdeka is their Independence Day. They celebrated it yesterday. But for developing countries to be coping so much better than we are, I think Scotland has done well, but I do not understand why it's possible for people still to be flying into Edinburgh Airport or Glasgow Airport and not be met with people taking their temperatures. What are you supposed to do? You're going to get folk coming off the plane and they're being told that they've got to socially distance when they get home and go to quarantine, but they're getting on the bus or they're getting on the train with other people. I mean, it's nuts. So I'm looking forward to this new app coming on that the First Minister announced today, so that people can, if you have been in touch with somebody unwittingly, if you've been shared a train with somebody coming back off a plague ship, then that's good that you're going to be told about it. But why is it taking this long? It's a thermometer and it's somebody standing taking a temperature at an airport. I do not understand why it's taking this long to do it.
Mm. Well, that is where we come to an end for this evening. So I'd like to thank Ruth and Stuart very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see both of you. And we'd like to thank you at home for joining us as well. The whole point of making the shows is so that we have an audience. So thank you very much for joining us as well. If you would like to support Broadcasting Scotland, we would ask that you please go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month helps us to keep doing what we do here at Broadcasting Scotland. If you're not able to support us financially, we do understand. The shows will always be free to view online, but you can still do us a real big turn by following us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, finding us on Facebook. If you just search for Broadcasting Scotland, we should be the first thing that pops up. Find our channel on YouTube and subscribe there. Click the bell icon to make sure you're updated when we upload a new video. And then like and share the videos around with people. Let them know what Broadcasting Scotland is and what we do, why you support us. And hopefully you can help us grow our audience in that way. And finally, particularly with the news today that we are looking at an independence referendum and an election next year, we are very much looking for more people to come and help out here at Broadcasting Scotland. We're going to have an election coverage night and competing with the BBC with their resources. It's a difficult thing to do. We can do it. We have got plans in place, but we are going to need people to help us. So whether that's being out in one of the counting centres, reporting back and sending some footage to us, perhaps doing a couple of interviews, whether it's being in the studio here commentating, whether it's being behind the scenes here kind of doing social media, calculating percentages and swings and all these kind of things, we really need to get some people involved, and we'd love to start training some of those people up as soon as possible. So if that's something you'd be interested in getting involved in, do please get in touch with us as soon as you can, and we can start work on those preparations. But that is absolutely all we have time for. So once again, thank you very much to Stuart McMillan MSP and to Ruth Watson. I'll be back again tomorrow at 7 with another Scotland at 7. But until then, have a wonderful evening. Good night.